Yeah, that is my face on the Twitch account. Yeah, I can hear it. Okay, I will get started then. Okay. All right. Welcome everybody to EGaDS editor. Wait, can you guys hear that dog barking outside?
Nope.
Nope.
Okay, good. Okay. Welcome to EGaDS editor scripting workshop. This is going to be going over how to use editor scripts, which are just like a certain type of script inside of Unity. Okay, so this is what we're going to be going over. What exactly are editor scripts? What do they do? Why do I care about them? And I'll go into detail on how to actually make an editor script from first step to final. And I'll show some applications of how to use editor scripts. Okay, so an editor script is really just a script that changes how another script appears in the Unity editor. So if you look at this script, this kind of display, like with the blue bar and everything, that's not possible in like vanilla vanilla Unity serializing fields and stuff. Because usually for Unity, the only way to like actually get a kind of like value that you can change inside the editor is by you making a variable public, and then you kind of just have to like use what UI Unity gives you to change that variable. And sometimes you don't want that, so that's why you would use an editor script. But what exactly would an editor script let you do other than just like, change the appearance of something? Well, there are three general purposes: ease of use, automation, and protection. So I'm going to go into each of these in a little bit more detail. And I'm just going to try to really hone in on why editor scripts are useful and why you should learn how to use them. Wait, also, is my audio okay? Am I going in and out?
You're good.
That sounds good to me.
Okay, nice. Yeah, and I don't know why it sometimes does that. Because I was having issues with that earlier today. But like sometimes it works fine. I don't know. I guess before I go into the purposes, are there any questions about what an editor script is or like what it looks like? I know we haven't gone over that much, but I want to make sure nobody gets left behind, especially if we don't have that many people. Okay. If we don't have any questions, I'll move on. So ease of use. What do I mean by ease of use? So for ease of use, what I mean is somebody should be able to look at your script in editor when they like see it in the inspector on the side, and they should be able to figure out what each of the variables do, and they should be able to use the game object use the script to its fullest without ever looking at the code. And when I say for yourself and others, for yourself, you want your code to be easy to use because sometimes going into the actual code is not the best option. So if you look here, if you have variables that you want to adjust as you like press play in the editor and like manually change to get the right feel, this is the worst way to do it. Don't do this. If you do it, bad, incorrect. And that's because if you have it like this, you need to actually change your C# code every single time you want to adjust a value. So you would be going into your code, you would be changing it in code, you would be going back into Unity. Unity would re-import your code, and then you would have to press play. And you wouldn't even be able to do it while you're pressing play. Like it'd be really cumbersome, really stupid. And so usually what you would do is a public variable. And that would solve the issue with having to go back and forth between your code and Unity. But sometimes you also don't really, sometimes you don't really want, sometimes you want something related to your variables that you can't really do in inside of the basic or the native Unity serializable fields. That was a lot of words. Sometimes, sometimes what Unity provides for adjusting variables isn't good enough. So, for example, if I wanted something that was like an example from the Unity website was if I have a variable that was like experience and I had a variable that was a level, and I wanted the level field to be like experience divided by 7, right? But I also want to be able to see the level, but I shouldn't be able to adjust it, right? Because it's dependent on another variable. If I made both of them public, inside the editor, I'd be able to see both of them, but I would be able to change level. And that's not really what I want, right? I want to be able to see level, but I don't want to be able to alter it. And that's something that you can change with Unity Unity editor scripts. You can make it so that that variable is not able to be changed. So that's kind of what I mean by ease of use for yourself. What I mean for ease of use for others, I kind of already talked about this before, but a really effective way to go about development in Unity is creating like one game object that you can put in like any scene, and it just works anywhere it's placed. So it's like self-reliant, it's self-contained. And something that helps scripts be self-contained is a lot of variables that you can adjust by yourself, and a lot of variables that might have more complex behaviors than the native library allows you to use. Basically, what I'm trying to say is editor scripts will allow you to make game objects that you can give to somebody and they don't have to look at the code at all to use. Yeah, that's pretty much all. All right, so I have an example for that second point, ease of use for others. So say I was making a Mega Man game, right? And I'm tasked with making a moving platform asset. So like this, it would move from here to here to here to here. Obviously, there are more points in between, but I didn't want to number them all. Let's just assume that it goes like in a square, because squares are good shapes, better than triangles. Okay, so say I also didn't have any access to any other variables, right? In this scene, I only knew about the platform. So what I would probably do is I would have a game object, it would contain a platform. It would contain 4 empty game objects that serve as like the points that it goes through. And I would have a script on the platform that takes in all of those points and goes in between them, right? Okay, so now say we want to have a variable that describes its starting position. So depending on this variable that you put into the editor, it would start. It would start from one of these points, right? And in the editor, if you want that to happen, right? If you're not using editor scripts, how would you make that happen? You would in the start function of the script make the transform of that platform equal to the transform of whatever numbered transform that you set it to. But there's a problem with this. If you do that in the start of that script, when you're looking at game object in scene in the editor, this platform won't actually move, right? It only does that once you're in runtime. So even if I make the starting position 2, like it won't automatically move to that point until I press play. Does that make sense? I just want to make sure everybody understands the problem before I actually explain how we would solve this with editor scripts. Yeah, and this is bad for a couple of reasons. It makes it so that what's shown in your editor scene isn't actually reflective of what's going to happen when you press play. So that's really disruptive, because if somebody doesn't know what's going on with this platform and is like, okay, it's right there, it'll start and I'll be right there when I start play, and then it's not, then you're gonna have to explain it to them. And explaining and talking to people, that's lame. You don't want to do that. So what's a way that you can avoid doing that, right? So editor scripts would allow you to detect when that variable is changed. It would be able to access the platform if the platform's a child of the object that the script is on. It would be able to access that platform, and it would be able to move it according to what you set the variable to. So it's kind of like editor scripts are a really interesting intersection of what's capable in code and what's shown in editor. It allows you to kind of translate between the two. And it's just a really useful way to prevent stuff like that from happening. Okay, so let's move on to the second purpose of editor scripts. So another good example of what editor scripts can do are allowing you to find all references to a certain type of file, and allowing you to snap a game object to a grid. And I use these 2 examples because both of them were, I learned both of them from an EGaDS member named Matt, maker of Gensetter in Affinity, if you've ever seen his username. But yeah, I learned about both of these from him. So he gets the credit on that. Yeah, so if any of you guys went to the scriptable objects workshop last week, you would know that scriptable objects are kind of like data containers you can instantiate. So if I made a scriptable object type, I would be able to create multiple of that scriptable object and have separate instances of data containers. That's just a brief summary of what scriptable objects are. And like each of those containers would be of the type of the scriptable object. So with an editor script, I would be able to, for example, put a button on a certain script. And when I press that button, it goes through all my files, finds that certain type of scriptable object, and then maybe like returns them to me in an array. And that's really useful if I have something like maybe a randomized weapon system that needs to find all the weapons that are available and then choose a random one. I would be able to describe each weapon with a scriptable object, find every reference to them with this editor script, and then be able to get a list of them and then randomly choose one. Oh, wait, I I didn't talk about the second one. Snap to Grid is also something Matt uses in his game Gemsetter. And it's pretty useful just to make sure that everything is like actually perfectly spaced. Because the grid system in Unity really isn't that good. It's kind of annoying to use. So he just made a button on one of his scripts that if you pressed it, it would just snap it to a certain sized grid. So this kind of shows you how Unity editor scripting can kind of make up for some of the downsides of Unity. It's really a really powerful tool that will help you it'll help you develop in this way that is best for you and best for your project. There's not actually an example code of the snap to grid, but at the end of this workshop, I will show you how to do the top one, finding all references to a type of file. Okay, let's move on. So the third use of editor scripts is, so I know I mentioned this earlier, but editor scripting makes it so that people don't need to look at your code. I really want to emphasize that because when somebody else is digging around in your code, you don't really know what they changed. It doesn't interact well with GitHub if you're using GitHub with Unity. And it's just generally like I don't trust other people to do code right, I guess sometimes. And sometimes I just don't want them to mess with something. So if I make it so that if they want something, they can change the editor script instead of the actual script. It makes sure that they can't like change private variables. They can't I'm trying to think of how to word this because it's a little hard to describe if you guys have never seen the code. You know what? I think I'll just leave it at if you tell somebody to not change your script and only change the editor script, you can more closely control what things that they're going to change because it builds on an existing script and it doesn't actually change anything in the original script. So that's really all I mean for protection. Okay, so let's go over how to actually make an editor script. And we're going to do all these steps later, but I want this to be a resource in case you ever want to use an editor script in the future. I'll post the slides in the EGaDS server workshop. So if you ever want to use this later, you'll have like a step-by-step guide. Okay, so the first step is to create a script in a folder named editor. So a weird quirk about editor scripts is they need to be in a folder called editor inside of your assets folder. And I don't think it needs to be directly after assets. I think it can be nested inside any other folder. So like assets, animations, and then editor. It just needs to be in an editor folder somewhere, or else it won't work. Okay. So the next thing that you do is you include the Unity editor namespace. This is just one line of code that you put at the very top. It's just importing the library for Unity editor. And the final thing that you, actually no, this is only the third step, but the final thing of this slide that you need to do is you need to make your editor script inherit from the editor class. So usually scripts inherit from mono behaviors, and that's what gives it all the transform and game object and like rotation stuff. I don't know. But when you inherit from an editor, it allows you to actually start changing the UI of a script class. So you need to do this before you actually start changing any code, change the scripting. Okay, so these are the last two steps. If you have your script editor, you need to actually make it reference the script you want it to edit. So that's what you do with this. And this function is what decides what is actually shown inside of your script field when it's shown inside of the Unity editor. The reason why it's override is the keyword override means that this is a function that exists in a parent class. So on inspect GUI is a function inside of editor. And usually this just displays the normal default Unity serializable fields. But since we're overwriting it here, that means we're deciding, okay, instead of whatever you have in your parent class, we're gonna do it now. So it's kind of like hijacking that. It's kind of hijacking that function, and then deciding use my implementation now instead of the parent one. Okay, so here are some resources. You'll be able to look at these after the workshop. And now we're gonna actually go into Unity and see this in action. Okay. I'll just make a folder called scripts. Inside of that, I'll make a folder called editor. And okay. Actually, the first step is to make a script that I want to edit. So let's just say that we want a spawner that spawns enemies, right? So we would make a C# script that would say spawner. Let's not do anything with that yet. But now that we have that script, we'll make a script that edits it. So we'll make a spawner editor. And you don't actually need to call it the spawner editor for it to work. It's just good to organize organize it like that so that you know what it's editing. Before we go on, are there any questions about what was on the slides? Just in case anybody anybody got lost during those. Where is the slideshow? Those will be to the EGaDS server after the workshop. So you'll be able to look at those there. And also this is being streamed on Twitch, so you'll be able to rewatch the recording if you need to afterwards. All right. So it looks like there aren't any questions, unless there are, in which case, please still ask them. But I'm just going to assume there aren't any right now, and I'm going to go on. Okay, so let's do all the steps that we talked about before. We're going to be using Unity Editor namespace. We're going to be inheriting from editor. We want to make custom editor for a type of. So custom editor type of, and we're editing spawner. Okay. We're also going to get rid of these starter functions because we don't really need them. Editor scripts don't usually use these. And last thing is public void override. Wait, I forgot it. Oh, public override void. Oh, okay. Override void. And you'll see that when you're using an override keyword, it'll show you what functions are able to be overridden. So specifically, we want to override this one. So implement this function, make a custom inspector. Yep. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what this does. So you see base.onInspector GUI, and usually it'll be like the same name as this. That means that base is like the parent class. So that means you're going up to the parent class, you're getting the reference of the original function, and then you're just putting it in this new function, or this child overridden function. So basically, this overridden function gets the original function and then just calls it inside of itself. So essentially, it's just the same. It's just the same function. This line makes sure that everything that happens in the old function also happens in this function. I'll zoom in. Yeah. Yeah, it does literally everything that the old one does. But now that you've done that, you can also add stuff down here, right? And it would keep everything from the original and also add more. I think another way you can do this is draw default inspector. Yeah, I think these might be slightly different. I think this keeps like everything, all the serializable fields that would be in the original one, and this one might be more general, like everything that's associated with the script. I'm not completely sure. But in any case, if you want your public variables, so say, let me go back to our spawner script. So say that we had a couple of variables here. Maybe we have a public float spawn interval. Maybe we have like a public, I don't know, Maybe we have a int number. And yeah, so we have those two variables. If I make a game object with that script on it, see what happens. Okay. So normally it would show just these two fields, right? But since it's a custom editor, and in that custom editor I have two things that draw the default inspector, it shows twice. So let's say we get rid of both of those. Well, now once I reload this script into Unity, it's like, oh, I guess you don't want anything in here because that function's empty. So that's just like a really basic way to show how this applies to it. Okay, so we pretty much only want to keep one. Okay, so let's start adding some custom stuff. One really simple thing you can do. Oh, I forget how to do this. Don't worry, I'm just Googling something. Okay. All right. So if I wanted to make a display that is not uh, chain editable, I would do something like this. I would do editor layout. Maybe I'll make a label field, and it would be something like, I don't know, level, right? And this describes what that label will be called, and it also takes in a value. So, so maybe we want the number field inside a spawner to be like modded by 3. Let's just say that. So we would say target as spawner. Oh, wait a minute. I'm kind of forgetting how to do this. Give me 1 second. Okay. So I would make a private function. It would return an int, or let's actually do a bool, and it would be is number even. How about that? And it would take in a spawner, and it would return spawner.number mod by 2 equals 0. So if you don't know what mod does, it just returns the remainder of this number divided by this number. So if its remainder is 0, it is even. Okay. And in here, we would call that function. Get out of the way. Go. Get away. We would call is number even. And as our parameter, we would do target as spawner. Dang it. Okay. You know what? this. So now the name is just going to be level and the bool. Whoops. Okay, so let me explain a little bit about what this target as spawner thing means. So target is really just anything that this inspector is on, and if it's overwriting a spawner script, that means this target will almost always be, but like it will be a spawner. So that's why you can kind of assume that the target is a spawner and then pass it into this function. Also, something I forgot to mention: target is an inherited variable from editor, and that's why you can reference it without ever declaring it anywhere. Okay, so let's see if this works. Okay, so it draws the default ones, and it has a label, and it does have a Boolean value. Let's see what happens if we change the number. And you'll see that that field actually changes with this update. So this might be useful for a more complex function here. So like instead of true, or instead of like just like checking if it's even, maybe it's like checking a player's safe state, and that label would say, are they able to trigger this event or not yet? You know, like in an RPG, have you completed these quests or not? You know, you don't want to go through a bunch of booleans and flags and just like checking each one and being like, okay, the giant if statement and like print stuff. No, this helps you do that, and it's really easy. You don't even have to go into code. This is a really good application of editor scripting. Okay, let's talk about a slightly more complicated example. So I'm going to actually make a scriptable object. I'll call it enemy. And again, for anybody who wasn't at the scriptable objects workshop 2 weeks ago, it's pretty much a data container. So it can have public int health as an enemy, right? Maybe like a public attack, public int attack. Maybe like a public float speed. Create menu. Wait, is this right? This might not be right. I think this is right. Okay. New enemy and menu name. This is just the enemy. Okay. So now that I've made that, I should be able to right click, create, and then I can create an enemy. So maybe you have a blob enemy, maybe you have like an orc. Oh wait, that's script, never mind. Maybe have an orc. Oh, lag. Okay. Maybe you have a skeleton. The blob would have like one in everything, who knows? Maybe this one would have like 5 and 1. Maybe the skeleton has a lot of speed, low health though. Okay. So, you notice I have this spawner script. For that spawner, well, I probably want an array that holds all the types of enemies that I can spawn, right? So maybe I have a public array and it holds enemies. So it holds scriptable object types. Oh, did this wrong. Like that. And I'll call it spawnable enemies. Right? So, if I'm back in editor, and I see, okay, well, since it's public, I can actually make this array, right? I can define as a size of 3, I can drag each of these inside. Okay. But that doesn't work if we have like 20 enemies and we're constantly adding more. Like, I don't want to change the size of this array myself and drag them inside every time. What if the order mattered too? Like, what do I do then? Like, manage this array of things? Like, that's annoying, and I don't want to do it. So, uh, so instead, you can have an editor script do it. Yeah. So let's see. Okay, get started on something that will allow us to find every single enemy type, store it in spawners spawnable enemies array, just with the click of a button, pretty much. So, if you want to make a button in a Unity, if you want to make a button in its editor script, it follows the syntax. And this would be the name of the button. So let's say load enemies. And inside this button, inside this if statement, you would put the code that you want to run when that button is pressed. So let's say, load enemies, and we would give it a spawner. Oh. Okay. So now we need to actually make that function. We would do not public, private void load enemies. We're taking a spawner. Oh, and okay. I'm not gonna smack you guys with the difficult code because you guys can find that on your own. Because honestly, I don't even really know what's up with it. It has like a bunch of asset library stuff, but pretty much all we want to do is we want to get spawner, right? And we want to access the spawnable enemies field, and we want to set it equal to something that will get all the enemy types in the project. And that's just with this code. You'll be able to look at it later. Oh, I also need to include another library. Pretty much this code is what would find all of the enemy scriptable objects, and it would put them into an array. This is really just to put it inside the actual spawner object. Okay, so let's see if this worked. It's loading. Okay, So now we have a button, right? Yeah. And now if we press that, okay, nice. It updates everything. Even if we like set this to 0, it would update it once we push this button. Cool, right? Let me also save so I can show you guys something else. Oh, whoops. Okay. Something that's important though. Let me make another scene. Sure. So we have something that can grab all the enemies, right? This button. But notice how when it put them into the script, it didn't give me the usual thing that shows. It didn't give me the asterisk next to the scene name, which usually means that you change something in the scene and you need to save now. It didn't do that. So if I go to the new scene, it won't tell me to save before I go into it like it usually does. And if I go back, oh no, it's gone. That sucks. How do I fix that? It's really just one line of code. It's just editor utility dot set dirty. And that just means that once this button's pressed, you'll tell the editor that you changed something and that it needs to save. So let's try that out. All right, and it now detects something's dirty. So if I try to go to it, it will tell me to save. If I go back, it will save it. Yep. So some really basic stuff with Unity editor scripting. And there's a lot more to this. I don't think I even barely scratched the surface. There's just so much stuff you can do with Unity editors. And really with this workshop, I just wanted to show you guys that just how powerful it is. It is also pretty difficult. It's a lot of working with UI. And as you just saw, there's a lot of small stuff that you need to worry about. But it's a really powerful tool. It gets easier to work with some experience. And pretty much just if you look up some tutorials, if you follow the resources that I linked, then you'll be able to reach a pretty good amount of skill with this, and it'll help you start making larger and larger games. So that is pretty much all I want to talk about. Are there any questions? And also I'll be sharing this code too. Okay. Yeah, if there aren't any other questions, I'll probably just call it there. We still have a lot of time, so we'll probably hang out a little. Usually for workshops, we block it out for 2 hours, but we really only plan stuff for the first hour. The second hour is for like questions and just to talk about stuff. So if you have to go, you are free to right now. This will go up later. The recording will be up later in case you missed it. And yeah, thank you all for coming.
Is it hangout time now?
It's
Yay!
hangout time.
Yay!
It's socials part 1.
Yay!
Monday social.
Monday social.
It'll be the social I'm able to attend this week.
True.
Man, I was talking really fast. There was a lot of stuff to say. Um, okay. All right. See you later, Rodrigo. Thanks for coming. Oh, and Jake,
Yeah,
probably
Jesse.
end the stream.
Hi, Jesse.
Oh.
Just
Hey, there he is.
It was really random, but I've been playing the food fantasy game.
Oh, how far are you?
I think I just got to level 20, but I have. It's weird how they rank the like the characters that you collect.
Oh, really?
Because like I think the lowest is R or something like that, and then it goes to. Okay, let me look at my.
Maybe R is for like really bad.
Oh wait, no, the lowest is M.
N.
And then it goes to R, and then after R